August 1942. A German soldier writes a letter home. "We have reached the Volga," he says. "The city will fall in days. Soon we'll be drinking champagne in Moscow." 3 months later, that same soldier is dead, frozen in the rubble of a city that consumed an entire army. At first, it did not feel like a catastrophe. It felt like another victory waiting to happen. Stalingrad, 200 days, 2 million men. The bloodiest battle in human history. When it ended, the bodies were stacked so high they blocked entire streets. The Volga River ran red for weeks. And Hitler's dream of conquering the Soviet Union died in the snow. The men believed the war would move on without them. That belief would not survive the city. This is the story of how a single city became Hitler's graveyard, how the Wehrmacht, undefeated for 3 years, walked into a trap they couldn't escape, how winter, stubbornness, and one man's ego destroyed the finest army Europe had ever seen. June 22nd, 1941. 3 million German soldiers crossed into the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. Hitler promised his generals they'd be in Moscow by October. The Soviet Union would collapse like a rotten barn door, he said. For 6 months, he was almost right. German panzers smashed Soviet armies, encircling millions. By December, Wehrmacht troops could see the Kremlin towers through their binoculars. Then the temperature hit -40. Tank engines froze solid. Soldiers lost fingers and toes to frostbite. The blitzkrieg stopped. The Germans had never experienced winter like this. Their uniforms were designed for Western Europe, wool tunics meant for autumn rain, not Siberian cold. Men stuffed newspapers under their jackets for insulation. They burned furniture from abandoned villages just to survive the night. Frostbite claimed more casualties than Soviet bullets. Entire divisions lost their combat effectiveness not to the Red Army, but to the weather. The Wehrmacht had conquered Poland in 35 days, France in 46. Now they were stuck in the snow, watching their invincible reputation freeze solid. The Soviets counterattacked. For the first time since 1939, the Wehrmacht retreated. Hitler was furious. Moscow hadn't fallen. The war wasn't over. The rotten barn door was fighting back. Summer 1942. Hitler needed oil. Without it, his tanks would run dry, his planes grounded, his war machine dead. The solution: Baku, the oil fields of Azerbaijan. Capture them, and the war was won. Lose them, and Germany would choke. Army Group South rolled east toward the Caucasus Mountains. 330,000 men. The finest divisions Germany had. But Hitler added one more objective: a city on the Volga River, an industrial center, a place that made tanks, weapons, ammunition for the Red Army. Its name? Stalingrad. Hitler didn't choose it for strategy. He chose it because of a name: Stalin's city. Capturing it would humiliate his enemy, prove German superiority, break Soviet morale. It was personal, and personal decisions in war get people killed. August 23rd, 1942, 4 p.m. The Luftwaffe appeared over Stalingrad. 600 bombers. They came in waves, dropping high explosives and incendiaries. The bombing lasted 2 days without stopping. 40,000 civilians died in the first 48 hours. Oil refineries exploded, pouring burning fuel into the Volga. The river itself was on fire. Stalingrad, a city of 500,000, became an inferno. Entire neighborhoods vanished. What the bombs didn't destroy, the fires consumed. By August 25th, Stalingrad was ruins. Stalin issued Order 227, not one step back. Anyone who retreated would be shot. The 62nd Army, commanded by General Vasily Chuikov, was ordered to hold the city. There would be no evacuation, no retreat. Stalingrad would be held or everyone would die trying. September. The German 6th Army entered the ruins. They expected to clear the city in days. Instead, they entered hell. Urban combat is chaos. No front lines, no maneuver. Just room to room, building to building slaughter. The Stalingrad railway station became a symbol of the insanity, a brick building at the city center. The Germans took it on September 14th. The Soviets counterattacked and retook it. Then the Germans attacked again. For 3 days, the station changed hands 15 times. 15 times. Soldiers fought room to room, platform to platform, sometimes across the same desk. Bodies piled so high in the waiting room that both sides used them as sandbags. By September 17th, the building was unrecognizable. Just a heap of rubble where men still killed each other over ground that no longer had any tactical value, only symbolic. The Soviets turned rubble into fortresses. Every apartment block was a bunker. Every window hid a sniper. Machine guns covered every street corner. The Germans advanced 50 feet and lost 20 men. They called it Rattenkrieg, Rat War. In the ruins, snipers ruled. Soviet marksman Vasily Zaitsev became legendary. A shepherd from the Urals, he killed 225 Germans in Stalingrad, each shot carefully recorded. The Germans sent their own master sniper, Major Erwin König, to hunt him. For days, the two stalked each other through the rubble. Zaitsev won. Sniper duels became psychological warfare. German soldiers stopped moving during daylight. They painted their helmets with mud to avoid reflections. Soviet propaganda turned Zaitsev into a hero. The truth was simpler. In Stalingrad, patience and a steady hand killed more men than courage ever did. Fighting for a single building took weeks. The grain elevator, a massive concrete fortress, changed hands 5 times in 4 days. Men fought without sleep, without food, high on adrenaline and terror. Bodies piled in stairwells, blood soaked into concrete. The factory district was hell's industrial core. The Red October steel plant, the Barricadi gun factory, the Dzerzhinsky tractor factory converted to produce T-34 tanks. These weren't just buildings. They were concrete fortresses, each the size of a city block. Blast furnaces, assembly lines, smokestacks all became battlefields. Soviet workers built tanks on one floor while German soldiers fought on the floor below. Molten steel from destroyed furnaces flowed through combat zones. Men were burned alive. The factories never fully fell. Germans controlled the ruins, but Soviet defenders clung to basements and workshops. Production continued even under fire. Tanks rolled off assembly lines directly into combat 30 meters away. Then there was Pavlov's house, a 4-story apartment building. Sergeant Yakov Pavlov and 25 Soviet soldiers held it for 58 days against everything the Germans threw at them. Infantry assaults, tanks, artillery, Stuka dive bombers. The building was destroyed, but it never fell. Chuikov had ordered his men to hug the Germans by the belt, get so close that German artillery couldn't fire without hitting their own troops, so close that air support was useless. Turn the battle into knife fights and fist fights, make every German advance cost blood. It worked. By October, the Germans controlled 90% of Stalingrad, but that last 10%, a thin strip of ruins along the Volga, wouldn't break, and the German 6th Army was bleeding to death trying to take it. When the encirclement closed, many did not realize it at first. The silence was unfamiliar. While the 6th Army bled in Stalingrad, General Georgy Zhukov studied maps in Moscow. He saw something the Germans didn't. The German flanks north and south of the city were held by Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian troops, poorly equipped, poorly trained, the weak points. Zhukov had learned from the disasters of 1941. Back then, the Red Army threw men into battle with no coordination, no intelligence, no plan. They were slaughtered. Now, Soviet planning was meticulous. Reconnaissance aircraft photographed every German position. Partisans behind enemy lines reported troop movements. Soviet intelligence knew exactly where the Romanian Third Army was deployed, how many men they had, what weapons they carried, even their morale levels. The Romanians were under-equipped, demoralized, and spread too thin. They were the crack in the German line, and Zhukov was about to drive a wedge into it. Zhukov's plan was brutal in its simplicity: hit both flanks simultaneously, punch through, encircle the entire Sixth Army, cut them off, trap them. The bloodiest ground in Stalingrad wasn't a building, it was a hill, Mamaev Kurgan Hill 102, a 100-meter rise that dominated the entire city. Whoever held the hill controlled observation over the Volga, the factories, everything. The Germans took it in September. The Soviets counterattacked. It changed hands multiple times. The fighting was constant. Soldiers called it the meat grinder. After the war, Soviet investigators found 1,200 shell fragments and shrapnel pieces per square meter of soil. On 1 square meter, the hill was metal and bone. More men died on Mamaev Kurgan than in entire battles elsewhere. Today, it's where the Motherland Call statue stands, built on the bodies of 35,000 men. November 19, 1942, 7:30 a.m., Operation Uranus began. 3,500 Soviet artillery pieces opened fire. The barrage obliterated Romanian positions. Then came the tanks. Waves of T-34s. The Romanian Third Army disintegrated in hours. 4 days later, Soviet forces from the north and south met at Kalach, west of Stalingrad. The jaws of the trap snapped shut. 250,000 German soldiers were surrounded, completely cut off. Food was no longer measured in meals. It was measured in days, and then in hours. General Paulus radioed Berlin immediately. Request permission to break out. His officers begged him, "We have to retreat now, while we still can." Hitler's response came back within hours. "Hold Stalingrad. You will be supplied by air." For 3 weeks, there was hope. Operation Winterstorm Field Marshal Erich von Manstein's relief attempt. On December 12th, 3 panzer divisions drove towards Stalingrad from the southwest. They smashed through Soviet lines. By December 19th, they were just 30 miles away. Inside the pocket, the Sixth Army could hear the guns. Paulus begged Hitler for permission to break out and link up with Manstein. Hitler refused. Hold Stalingrad. Manstein's tanks waited. Paulus didn't move. The Soviets counterattacked. Manstein was forced to retreat. The relief force withdrew. Inside the pocket, soldiers watched their last hope disappear over the horizon. They were alone. It was a death sentence. The Sixth Army needed 700 tons of supplies daily just to survive. Food, ammunition, fuel, medicine. Hermann Göring promised the Luftwaffe could deliver it. He was lying. German transport planes managed 100 tons on a good day. Soviet fighters shot down dozens of Ju-52s every week. Christmas, 1942. Inside the Kessel, German soldiers tried to remember what humanity felt like. Some units held small services. They sang carols in frozen bunkers, voices cracking. Officers distributed 1/3 rations as Christmas dinner, a sliver of horse meat, a crust of bread. Men wrote final letters home knowing they'd never be sent. Some burned family photographs to stay warm. Others stared at them until they froze. The cold was -30. Morphine froze solid. Ink froze in pens. One soldier wrote in his diary, "Christmas used to mean home. Now it just means we're still alive." Most wouldn't see New Year's. For them, this was the last Christmas. And they knew it. Inside the pocket, the Kessel, the Germans called it, men began to starve. Daily rations dropped to 300 calories, bread made from sawdust. Soldiers slaughtered their horses, then they ate rats. Then they ate nothing. Winter hit hard, minus 35 degrees. Men froze to death in their sleep. Frostbite turned hands and feet black. Field hospitals overflowed with the dying. There was no morphine, no anesthetic. Surgeons amputated limbs with hacksaws while men screamed. Hitler refused every request to break out. Retreating from Stalingrad would be admitting defeat. The Sixth Army would hold. They would die there if necessary, and they did. Some men stopped hoping for rescue. Others never stopped waiting for it. January 10, 1943. The Soviets launched Operation Ring. 7 armies, over 400,000 men began compressing the pocket. There was no escape, no relief force. The end was coming. The Germans fought with the desperation of condemned men. Not for Hitler, not for Germany, but because surrender meant Siberian prison camps where most would die of starvation and typhus. So they fought, block by block, building by building, buying time they didn't have. By mid-January, the Germans were out of ammunition. Soldiers were issued 5 bullets per day. Some units fought with captured Soviet weapons. When they ran out of bullets entirely, they used bayonets, knives, and their bare hands. But the Soviets kept coming. Waves of infantry, supported by tanks, artillery, and aircraft. The Sixth Army wasn't fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to delay the inevitable. Every hour they held was another hour of life. That was all they had left, hours counted and numbered, running out. By January 26th, the pocket was split in 2. By January 31st, it was over. General Friedrich Paulus sat in the basement of a department store, his final headquarters. Hitler sent one last order: fight to the last man. Do not surrender. Paulus ignored it. At 7:45 a.m. he surrendered to Soviet forces, the first German field marshal to ever surrender in battle. The Sixth Army, Hitler's finest, was destroyed. Paulus surrendered, but the battle wasn't over. The Northern Pocket 11th Corps under General Karl Strecker refused Hitler's final order too, but kept fighting for 2 more days. Not from loyalty, but from desperation. They had no illusions. Surrender meant captivity, likely death. So they fought, not for Germany, not for Hitler, just to delay the inevitable. On February 2nd, 1943, the last shots were fired. General Strecker sent his final radio message: 11th Corps has fought to the last man and the last round. Then, silence. After 200 days, Stalingrad was over. The city had consumed an entire army, and it would never let go. 91,000 German soldiers surrendered, skeletal, frostbitten, half-dead. They were marched east into captivity. Only 6,000 would survive to see Germany again. The rest died in Soviet camps from typhus, starvation, exhaustion, despair. But the Soviet cost was far higher. Over 1 million Red Army soldiers died defending Stalingrad, 40,000 civilians killed in the bombing, tens of thousands more starved or froze in the ruins. Stalingrad was the deadliest battle in human history, and it changed everything. The battle ended, but it did not conclude. It remained in memory and in silence. The myth of German invincibility was shattered. For 3 years, the Wehrmacht had been unstoppable. Now, they were broken. From Stalingrad forward, Germany would never launch another successful offensive in the east. The tide had turned. The road from Stalingrad led, inevitably, to Berlin. Hitler's obsession with a name cost him his best army. His refusal to retreat cost 250,000 German lives. His ego turned a military objective into a symbol, and symbols don't win wars. Stalingrad proved that. Today, The city is called Volgograd. The Motherland Cause statue stands 279 feet tall on Mamaev Kurgan, the hill where the bloodiest fighting happened. It's one of the tallest statues in the world. A reminder, a warning. 200 days, 1 million dead. The battle that broke Hitler forever. Stalingrad didn't just change World War II. It changed history. The moment the world learned that even the most powerful evil could be stopped if you were willing to pay the price.